foam baths, Merlot, Starbucks, ice cream, Netflix, entertainment. With our husbands. This prompted a fit of giggles. The other passengers on the plane smiled. The sight of two attractive women, clearly very happy, elicited a positive reaction. I was a doctor, a surgeon, and Solange worked as an emergency room nurse when she was home. When we found ourselves in some backwater African country, she and I would do whatever was needed at the time. We delivered babies, set bones, even helped the local dentist if he needed someone. This was my second and her third experience with Doctors Without Borders. The first time was very hard on me both physically and mentally. I lost 20 pounds that I had no way to lose, and I almost went crazy with depression. I literally counted the seconds until I got home, fell into my husband's arms and sobbed hysterically for 10 minutes. Then I pulled myself together and grabbed my then 7-year-old son, hugging and kissing him until he almost resisted me to let him go. I soon discovered that for the first few days after my return, my husband treated me somewhat coolly. He seemed to harbor resentment that I had left it all. I still remember our not-so-common arguments about it. Let someone else save the world, dear. You have people who need you more here at home. People are dying. People I can save. You're saving a lot of lives right here at home, and you can sleep in our own bed without fear of being destroyed. It's not that bad. I can save a lot more people there than I can here. We're protected, and I'll be assured I'm in a safe place. Maybe I should pull up some stats for you. Sometimes I hated his job. He was a freelance writer and took assignments on any topic from anyone who was willing to pay him. He was meticulous in his research, and if he quoted something, it could be quickly verified. He started out small, doing it part-time, mostly as a hobby, but now he was writing for major newspapers and magazines. He'd even won a few awards for outstanding achievement. Then one of his friends got him his own YouTube channel, where he wrote short articles about anything that interested him. After 3 years, he had almost 2 million subscribers, and his annual income from advertisers was almost $100,000 a year after fees. All in all, he was making as much and sometimes more per year than I was. Shortly before I left, he was invited to become a CNN contributor, mostly to dispel the relentless seriousness of the service. Our niece told him he was now an influencer, and he had no idea what she was talking about. She gave him a definition, and he naturally studied it. He then published an article on his channel in which he warned people to watch out for the validity of what they are being told, no matter how successful the person sharing the information is. We all have a purpose, even if we don't realize it. So I try to be impartial in my work. If I believe something, it doesn't mean you have to believe it. It doesn't mean I'm right or wrong. It means you have to take everything with a grain of salt. Don't blindly take my or anyone else's words as gospel and use your own judgment. In other words, think for yourself. Unfortunately, this habit has been increasingly lost in recent years. It took 5 months before he agreed to my trip. Then it was another 3 months before I went. I was on an emotional high and he remained cold. I'll be home before you know it. The incredible sadness in his eyes hasn't left me to this day. Do you realize that nothing will ever be the same again? I will no longer trust you to put your family's interests first. I'm telling you this now, not asking you. This is a one-time thing. If you run away from your family again, you won't have one when you come back. I was still reeling from his words when he snatched the crying baby from my arms and walked away without looking back. I was sent to an African country that was as backward as it could ever be outside of cities. My operating room was a tent, and not a very secure one at that. The summer winds blew relentlessly, and it was no big deal that in the middle of surgery, a corner of the tent would blow away, covering everything in dust. It's a wonder they didn't all die of infections. Nevertheless, we saved a lot of people. During my time there, I delivered 4 babies. After 3 months, I was climbing the walls. The fear and anxiety wouldn't let go. When I first shared a room with Solange, I once asked her why she was so calm, and I was distraught. I can offer you some medicine. You need some good entertainment. I guess it's good for single women like you. I'm married. She grinned and opened some pictures on her phone. There were a couple little girls in the frame and a very handsome man. My husband and children. But you're sleeping with Jean-Luc. Yes, and if he's not here, I share a bed with Eric. Look at everyone's hands, dear. Rings are forbidden here. Symbolic, really. No one marries here, and what happens in the country stays in the country. We return to our husbands and wives and commit ourselves to them until we return again. I make sure I give my rings to my husband when I leave, and the first thing he does when I come home is to put them on me. It's a comeback. Didn't anyone get caught? One of the doctors got caught a couple years ago. We're medical professionals, and she forgot her birth control. When she came home, she was 2 months pregnant. Her husband was good at math, and the truth came out. They divorced, and the organization paid him not to go public. The doctor was no longer allowed to work. What about the illnesses? She rolled her eyes. Medical professionals, remember? We get checked at least once a month, and if something slips through, we deal with it quickly. Think about it, honey. No one will ever know. I lasted 5 months, and then I lost a mother and her child to an IED blast. When they were brought in, I did what I could, but they were too damaged. I was out of it, drank almost the entire bottle of bourbon, and woke up in an unfamiliar bed with one of the male nurses. Before I could say anything, he was on top of me again, and I just gave in and let the discharge overwhelm me. Rodrigo didn't leave my bed for the rest of his shift, and 4 days later he was replaced by a doctor. He held out for the rest of our tour. I knew my husband would recognize him the first time we met, but he was too busy digesting his anger over my leaving to notice. It was 4 months before I was in his bed again. A year passed, and we were back to normal. Then I got a call from the organization asking me to fill in urgently for 3 months. I was filling in for a woman who had been in a car accident. I never told my husband that it was due to a mortar hit too close. We had a terrible fight, and it went on for 3 days. Finally, he threw his hands up in the air. Do whatever you can think of. Just don't expect us to wait for you to come home. I'll try to be polite if you'll let me. I intend to ask for custody. It'll be hard for you to get it if you are away for months or a year. No judge in his right mind would allow Tommy to live with you. Now that was something I had in no way expected. It's only been 13 weeks and I'll be back soon. I tried to talk some sense into him. He stayed in the house for Tommy's sake, but hardly spoke to me until I left. I didn't think he would agree, but he drove me to the airport. I didn't do it for you. I did it for me. The fact that you're leaving, knowing what you'll lose if you leave, is something I need to see to sustain myself for the next few months. When you come back, things will be very different. There's no need to rush. If they need you for a month, a year, or the rest of your life, that'll be just fine. He turned without another word and left me standing still. I knew he meant what he said. I knew that if I wanted my family, I had to hurry after him. I decided to fix that as soon as I got home and headed for the ticket line. Solange greeted me with a hug as I approached the seat. If it was possible, it was even shittier than the last one. I'm glad you're here. Don't bother unpacking. Pack up. We really need you. There had been a mortar attack on a village 40 miles away, and I was surprised at the number of people who had survived long enough to make it to the clinic. My team worked 11 hours without a break. About half of our patients survived, which was pretty good considering everything that was going on. 5 died on my table. After the 4th, I just turned to another table and started working while they removed the body and set up the table for the next patient. One of my losses was a 9-year-old girl. Her heart stopped as she cried for her mother. I was in a daze. Solange led me to a communal shower and helped me clean up. By the next week, I had settled in. We talked about our last rotation and our return. Solange perked up when she started talking about entertainment. He's starting to lose patience, and I can't blame him. He's let me do 3 tours, and I think that's where it ends. How does your husband feel about it? I remember he wasn't too pleased last time. He says he's going to file for divorce and ask for custody, using my service here against me. I'm hoping I can patch things up when I get home, but last time it took him forever to get attached to me again. I wouldn't worry, dear. Perhaps he fears for your safety. He may keep you on a short leash for a while, but eventually he'll forgive you and get over it. But I wouldn't push your luck. The organization appreciates everything you've done, but in the end you have to put yourself first. I hope you're right. I'll do my best to make it up to him when I get home, and I absolutely will not serve another tour. It's time for someone else to save the world. Then I grinned. So who's warming your bed now? She giggled. Gerard. He's from Algeria and very talented as a doctor, among other virtues. Are you going to go out with him? No, it's only for a few weeks. I can handle it. 2 weeks later, I was already having fun with Gerard. How did that happen? Jean-Luc returned, and Solange immediately turned Gerard's attention to her former lover. I got the itch again, and one thing led to another. I cried when we broke up. I sat on the airplane and made plans. There was no way I was going back, and I needed to get that across to Brian, make him realize that this wasn't for me, and I would be a good little wife from now on. Solange advised me to pave the way to his heart through our son, and then laughed. Remember that you can scratch the itch, but he can't. Rub against it as often as you can. He'll get back to normal in no time. That turned out to be a little harder than I thought. When I got home, he wasn't there. My mom had our baby, and said he told her it was too good an opportunity to pass up and that he would be gone for another 10 days. It was a blessing because it gave me a lot of time to focus on my son. If I could get him back, the rest would be easy. Next chapter. While I was making plans to revive my family, I later learned that Brian was sitting in the organization's corporate office talking to the head psychiatrist. Thank you for your interest in our charity, Mr. Oliver. We could use all the publicity we can get. After all, we are funded by donations. It seems like a worthy cause to provide much-needed services where they are least expected. I know you downplay the importance of it, but your organization has lost people over the years, and that should be a concern for all the volunteers you attract. It is. That's why we do a full mental evaluation before we accept a volunteer. Unfortunately, it's a noble endeavor, but it's not for the faint of heart. Some people have breakdowns from stress, and in recent years, post-traumatic stress disorder is not uncommon. We offer them full support for as long as they need it. It sounds like you try to take care of your employees. Do many of them do more than one rotation? There are some, but we limit ourselves to 4 rotations and don't encourage them. 2 is the norm. How do they handle the stress of having everything going on around them? It's difficult, but they support each other to build morale and reduce fear. I have a confession to make to you, Dr. Parkins. I did a little research on divorce rates and failed relationships among people who have served 2 or more tours of duty, and it's unusually high. Care to share your opinion? The doctor was silent for a moment. Some people don't handle the situations they find themselves in well and seek comfort, however inappropriate, wherever they can find it. Our goal is to help repair damaged relationships. So you consider failed marriages and broken relationships acceptable collateral damage? The needs of the many versus the needs of the few? Would such an argument work for the spouses of doctors, nurses, and technicians who are about to be left at the front wondering if they'll have a marriage when they return? I don't like where you're going with this interview. Stories like this will have a negative impact on the organization. Yes, my research has shown that you like to gloss over such things and keep them in the shadows. I found at least 3 instances where significant sums changed hands to keep out of the public eye. Do your donors have any idea that they are funding this? The doctor stood up. I believe our conversation is over, Mr. Oliver. I urge you to think about what you're writing. People lose their jobs reporting this kind of garbage. The man grinned, which worried the doctor. I found it in my bio, too. It's one of the reasons I like being independent. I don't have to give in to pressure. He walked to the door and turned. For general information, you should look up Dr. Hope Oliver. I think she's worked for you before. He turned and walked out the door. As soon as it closed, the doctor wrapped his arms around his head. This seemed to be a private matter for him, and his independence meant that there was little pressure on him. He checked Brian Oliver, amazed at the number of subscribers he had. Then he remembered seeing him on CNN. The situation could quickly become dire. He called his assistant. Get me the file on Dr. Hope Oliver. She may still be somewhere in the country. If she's home, I need her contact information. That's the first priority, Benjamin. After the assistant disconnected, he stared at the phone for a moment, sighed, and called the CEO. Next chapter. I was surprised by the call. It was a charitable organization, and the caller was very high up in the hierarchy. Dr. Oliver, we need you to come to our headquarters as soon as possible. It's very urgent. Why? This is not a good time to leave home. My husband is away on a mission, and I'm mostly taking care of our son right now. Plus, I've resumed work at the hospital, and I have surgeries scheduled. And if you haven't read my file yet, you should definitely read it. I will no longer be serving. It's been a very rewarding experience, but it's time for me to be with my family. My husband is not very supportive of my service. Your husband is exactly the reason we are calling. He was here yesterday and said some very disturbing things. Things that could really hurt us in the public eye. We are trying to get to the bottom of this, and it is in your best interest to come to us. I could feel the blood leaving my body. Brian was like a bloodhound. Once he caught the scent, he would chase it down to the last person if he decided it was worth it. Doctors and nurses are pretty gossipy by nature, and if one of them blabbed about what happened overseas, it could turn out very, very badly for a lot of people. The first thing I did after I hung up the phone was to call Solange and tell her what the man had said. I bragged to her what a good journalist Brian was, and we watched him on CNN one night in France when we were flying out. Jesus, this could be a disaster. My husband doesn't know how to forgive, and he would leave me in a heartbeat. You need to get in touch with your husband, Hope. Beg, promise him anything to keep him from doing this. Think of the others. Almost all of us are married. This could spread to 3 continents. I called Brian a dozen times, but they all went to voicemail. He didn't respond to emails or texts, and I was at a loss. I had no idea where he was or how to get a message to him. I changed my schedule, citing a family emergency because it was very important to me, and flew to New York. I arrived there at 9 in the morning and went straight to their headquarters. Dr. Parkins, who did my examination before I could join them, met me at the front desk and immediately escorted me to his office. After the standard pleasantries, he asked why I was here. Your husband seems to be a rather angry man, doctor. I'm going to ask you some tough questions that I assure you will never be discussed outside of this building. And you must be honest if we want any of us to survive. Are you ready? I nodded, knowing what awaited me. Did you happen to have any fun with any of the staff during your missions? If so, with whom? Did you try to avoid public displays of attention? Did you socialize with anyone outside the organization? I named my 2 longtime lovers and 2 other people with whom I'd had lost weekends. Dr. Parkins kept a neutral expression on his face, and I wondered what he would think of me when I was done. Thank you for your candor. Truth be told, although it happens quite often, the incidence rate is no higher than that of medical professionals in normal life. It's just that things are more concentrated and intense in these situations. I've helped probably dozens of people facing this problem, and my advice is always the same. Do what your conscience dictates. 95% take it to the grave with them, and those who realize it rarely do otherwise. He looked thoughtful for a few seconds before continuing. However, this is not a common situation. I can say with reasonable certainty from talking to your husband that he is aware of your antics both times you were abroad, and he is very angry. Angry people are not known for their discretion. On the rare occasions when something like this has happened, we've been able to contain it. That's not going to happen in this case. We can put a lot of pressure on CNN, but we don't have the resources on his personal website. He can express his opinion however he wants, and there's nothing we can do about it. It could really hurt us. How many spouses will support him the way they supported him before this story came out? We need people like that to exist. If you have any influence over your husband, now is the time to use it. My answer didn't make him very happy. Sir, right now I have no idea where my husband is or what he is doing. He has refused any contact with me. Who knows what he might do? We found out the next day. Every New York newspaper wrote about it, and the whole world found out about it. 4 dozen spouses filed a class action lawsuit against the charity for ruining their marriages and long-term relationships over the past 6 years. They were seeking millions of dollars in compensation. The suit was international, filed in French, English, Italian, and Algerian courts, as well as in the US and Canada. The benefactors found him determined and very, very angry and uncooperative. They tried to reason with him until he told them that he had recorded every meeting or phone conversation since he began the investigation. He knew he was obeying the laws of our state and 2 others, and even if he didn't use them in court, he could show them on his channel. Wives and husbands of those who had recently served demanded the truth from their spouses, and most of them did not believe what they heard. Less reputable newspapers seized on this and made a big deal out of it. Scandals sell in such publications, and there seemed to be no shortage of stories. Social media dubbed us #doctors without morals. The media picked up on this and made it an official mantra. Brian was named the author of the story, and that led directly to me. Every media outlet in the world offered to interview me, But I stubbornly refused until it occurred to me that since Brian wouldn't talk to me, this might be a way to get the word out, but I never got the opportunity. Next chapter. He eventually came home, completely ignoring me and spending a lot of time with our son. When I told him I needed a way to contact him in an emergency, he showed me his phone and gave me the number. If you ever call for anything other than my son, I will throw it away. The first time he stopped by my mom's house to pick up Tommy, I was waiting for him on the steps. Brian, we need to talk. You need to let me explain everything and help you understand. What I was doing out there is completely unlike us. It never intruded on our lives or meant anything when I was home. He looked at me for a second. Let me ask you something. While you were out there having fun, did it ever occur to you how your actions would affect our marriage? Would you forgive me if, when you came home, you discovered that I'd had a whole series of affairs while you were away, and I told you they meant nothing because you weren't here? That's not the same thing. Nonsense, this conversation is over. Bring Tommy out so I can leave. Something here is giving me the creeps. After that, he stopped talking to me. If I tried to start a dialogue, he just stared at me until our son came along. Tommy lived with his father again. The court decided to leave him there because it was what he was used to and most comfortable with. The judge also ruled that he could live in our home until the case was settled because he was the primary caregiver. I rented a small apartment not far from the hospital. It was an ordinary box, not at all like the house with the big yard we had bought 5 years before. Brian didn't have to work as many hours as I did, so he became a semi-house husband. He worked when Tommy was napping, and then when he was at school. He landscaped the backyard, putting a fence around it, as well as a sandbox, swings, and a very large pool where they spent hours in the summer. In 5 years, I probably swam in it twice. One day I came home and saw 3 girls in bikinis frolicking in our pool. I was really pissed, but Brian chuckled. I still have to work, you know. I could work nights while you take care of him, but do you really want to come home to the demands of a 6-year-old after a long day? It's better this way. Kimberly, the one in the red bikini, is a very qualified nanny, so I hired her. The other 2 are just friends. Part of the employment contract was that she can use the pool a couple days a week. She can have 2 friends with her at the same time, no more, and no boys. Tommy loves her. She gets along very well with him. And I work. She's never in the pool while she's working, only with Tommy. She's teaching him to swim. Isn't that great? I understood the fairness of his words, but they still hurt. You can work with half-naked, no, almost naked baby sprites in front of you? Sprites? What have you been reading lately? My office is in the other corner of the house. I can see them if I get up from my desk and crane my neck toward the window. Or I can come out here like I'm doing now and tell them it's late and it's time for them to go home. Tommy woke up from his slumber, threw himself into my arms and dragged me over to the girls so I could meet Miss Kimmy. Talking to them relaxed me, and when Kim told me she was going to enter the nursing program in the fall, we found common ground. I got her a volunteer job at the hospital, mentored her as best I could, and wrote her a glowing letter of recommendation for college. Kim was a sophomore in high school and doing well. Her replacement was her younger sister, Alexis, Miss Lexi, whom Tommy loved almost as much as Kim. I had a feeling they did a lot of mothering while I was gone. And Miss Lexi really knew how to pull on a bikini. The charity wanted to settle the class action lawsuit on the condition that there be a non-disclosure clause in the agreement. They told me about the meeting. Brian laughed, which gave their lawyers heartburn. Everyone else agreed to it. Why can't you just forget about it and move on with your lives? One of the lawyers asked. I'm over it, Brian replied. But I haven't forgiven her or your organization. I know how hard you recruited her, telling her how good this would look on her record and could lead to future counseling opportunities. I'm still trying to figure out how you work. In all other cases, the offended were bribed, sometimes with money, sometimes with business connections. I don't need money, and there's no way I'm getting into bed with you assholes. I'm just now writing my second article on your organization, and I'm on a deadline, so screw it. They got up to leave, and just before they left, the youngest lawyer, a woman 3 years out of law school, asked him a question. Isn't your anger a bit misdirected? After all, what happened was your wife's fault. She cheated on you. I realize that, and I'm sorry. Shouldn't you make her life hell, not ours? He smiled at her, which made her nervous. Then he showed her a picture of his son. This is my son. Thanks to him, I didn't vaporize my wife. Without him, she would have turned into a disheveled corpse for the rats to feast on 15 minutes after she stepped off the last plane. Maybe my anger is misplaced, but over the years your organization should have learned that these things happen. Heck, you even wrote a protocol on how to deal with an angry spouse. You assessed the impact it would have on your organization and decided that a little collateral damage was acceptable. Apparently, it was until I showed up. I must be your organization's worst nightmare. I have an independent income so you can't pressure me for my job. I make good money so you can't starve me. And I have enough rage in me to ignore veiled threats. You can go. She turned slightly pale as she walked away. The anger emanating from the man in waves left her confused. Next chapter. I wasn't surprised when I received the divorce papers. Every step I took ended in disappointment. I was at his house so often that he issued a restraining order. If I came within 100 feet of him or his house, I could be arrested. My employers were not happy with the circus my life had become. I hadn't done anything objectionable at home, and so far it had come down to mere accusations, but the administrator called me into his office anyway. I'm speaking to you on behalf of the board of directors. Your personal life is distracting us from our work, and we cannot allow it to disrupt our normal routine. You are a brilliant surgeon and we respect you very much. This is not an official request, just a friendly suggestion to ask your husband to tone it down a bit. Please, Sarah. I promised that I would do my best, knowing that I couldn't even talk to him at the moment. He said I could send emails if I needed to, so that night I sat down at my laptop and wrote for 5 hours before I decided it was the right thing to do. I hit the send button and went to bed, hoping I would get a reply. When I read the response the next morning, I got a twitch. I don't care about your professional reputation, your relationship with the hospital, or any collateral damage I cause as long as it doesn't involve our son. If you catch me in a lie, send me a message and I will retract what I said and apologize fully. 4 nurses, 5 technicians, and 2 other doctors from your hospital were on assignments for this organization. I wonder what I would find if I followed them. Perhaps I should warn them. That didn't work. I showed the letter to the administrator. He only sighed. He closed the door and exploded. Shit, Sarah, this is really bad. You know I'm going to have to bring all these people in and warn them. They might not take it well and you're going to have to work with them, so things might get a little tense. The hospital cannot under any circumstances jeopardize the quality of care for our patients. So I want you to finish this day and then clear your schedule. Take a week off to try and work this problem out somehow. Good luck, Sarah. Well, that was abundantly clear. Fix this outrage or start looking for a new hospital. The boss did the interviews, and I got some pretty interesting calls. 3 technicians, 2 nurses, and 1 doctor contacted while on assignment. 2 picked each other up and brought each other home. All were married or in serious relationships. Now the 6 men agonized over the decision. Should they confess now and hope for the best or go and deny everything? I hoped they would all keep quiet because if one broke down and confessed, it could affect all of them. I found out about all of this later. At that point, I had a mission. I asked my lawyer to invite him to a conference, and if they agreed, I would sign the divorce papers. I finally realized that my marriage was broken, and nothing could fix it unless one person was willing to try. I was surprised that they agreed. 3 days before we met, Brian had published a scathing essay about doctors and the God complex. As usual, he had done extensive research and talked to many experts, so the article was accurate and to the point. One famous psychologist said that almost all successful people have this complex to some degree, regardless of their field of work, if they have risen high enough. But it is more pronounced in the medical profession because it is often a matter of life and death. He talked about the self-esteem it sometimes engenders, and it got me thinking. From this essay, I learned a lot about my own behavior. Had I really become so arrogant? Did I really think that my vocation and position allowed me to believe that the normal rules did not apply to me? Have I isolated my life to the point where I can justify my behavior? The short answer is yes, yes, and yes. I was frustrated during those missions, but I could have kept my legs shut if I had chosen to do so. Or I could have just stayed home. Instead, I decided that what I was doing was just a stress reliever that wouldn't affect my marriage in any way, that I deserved it if it kept me sane, and that what happens in the field stays in the field. I thought about it for a long time and realized that I missed the casual fun, the thrill of a new partner, and would probably cheat again here at home if I felt safe and had the opportunity. It was a sobering assessment. Next chapter. The meeting went surprisingly well. There were a few minor issues that needed to be addressed, but they were quickly settled. Brian would provide primary care for our son, which had already been provided for since his birth, but I would have free visitation rights. Our incomes were pretty close, so no child support would be charged to either party, but in lieu of child support, I would provide for the college fund by making regular transfers to an account Brian would set up. All in all, it was very fair. Brian wanted to take the house, but instead of selling him my half, I signed an agreement that he would transfer to the college fund what he paid me. He thought it was a very kind act on my part. I felt a prick of regret as I looked at him. We were good together. Sure, we had arguments and outright fights, but we never held a grudge, solved our problems, and never, ever fought in front of our child. Until I decided to go on a mission. My therapist, yes, I had a therapist who was trying to make sure I would never repeat my mistakes if I found another partner, and that seemed like a good idea, helped me realize that that's when I stopped being part of a couple and became the realm of one. Brian wasn't exactly blameless. He could be aloof and moody, especially if he was working on something that upset him, but he did his best to minimize it. Until I went on my first assignment, he was supportive of my career in every way possible. But after I came home, he didn't seem to care. I had a scheduling conflict, not his problem. I think it was during this period that he sensed that nothing good would come of it and had already gone into self-defense mode. After all the I's and T's were dotted, the lawyers left and we sat in the conference room and talked, really talked, as we usually do before my first assignment. It occurred to me that we hadn't had a conversation like this since I first left. This will be the last time I apologize to you, Brian. If I knew then what I know now, I never would have gotten on that plane. But I became so narcissistic at the time, so self-sufficient that I realize it now. I started making decisions with little or no concern for you and our son. Unfortunately, all the decisions I make now will be made without your input. Not necessarily. We still have our son, and he will bind us together for at least the next 15 years, all the way through college. Then we'll have weddings to plan and fights over who gets grandchildren when. So we'll be a constant presence in each other's lives. That made me smile through my tears, but it was too much. So I gave him what would probably be my last kiss and left. Next chapter. I don't know if it was the divorce or our conversation that calmed him down, but he backed away from the organization. I do know that as a result of the class action lawsuit, money changed hands and Tommy's college education fund increased significantly. The pressure became too much, and I changed hospitals, traveling across town to our largest competitor. Management made the necessary comments, but I know they were relieved to see me go. All of the people on past business trips have had marriage problems, but thankfully there has only been one divorce, although some of the remaining relationships are on fragile ground. I didn't date for almost a year. Even when I started dating, I was very cautious and didn't get into a serious relationship for another year. Everything came crashing down when I found out he didn't want kids and couldn't be around them. Another 18 months passed and I found my love. He too was a doctor, a pediatrician, and he loved children. We took our time. We were both divorced and things were still fresh enough that we proceeded cautiously. In a way, it was a good thing, because we really got to know each other before embarking on a serious relationship. Brian remained single too, although he was dating a producer through his work at CNN, and they were showing signs of a serious relationship. Tommy liked her and had two adorable little girls who followed him around like puppies when they were around each other. The television company was pressuring him to devote himself completely to them. He wasn't thrilled with the idea, and I knew that if they didn't back down, he would leave the network when his contract ran out in 4 months. MSNBC and Fox had already sent offers, so he wouldn't be off the air for long. I was driving through the neighborhood one afternoon and decided to stop at an ice cream parlor to see if Tommy wanted to go with me. It was an independent little store, and they made all their own ice cream. There weren't 50 flavors, but about a dozen, and they alternated according to the season, using local fruit if they could get it. It was peach season, and that was my favorite. They sold it in quarts, and when I knew I'd be there, I'd take a little ice chest with me and buy 3 or 4 for home. I almost didn't stop when I saw the car in the driveway, but I had already honked and Tommy spotted me. He jumped off the porch, grinning, and his two shadows followed him. Brian and Alicia were sitting on the swing and waved at me. I leaned over and gave him a hug. Then, a tiny 4-year-old girl held out her arms to me. I could have pulled back, but I grinned, grabbed her and her 6-year-old sister at the same time, and enclosed them in a hug. When I was done, the girl remained in my arms, and I carried her with me. Brian smirked slightly, and the mother didn't know what to say. "Hi, I'm Sarah. Let's make a deal. I'll trade you a 10-year-old boy, slightly used, for these cuties. I might even be able to be talked into adding a pony." The woman grinned back. "A pony, you say? Let me think about it. Martha, but everyone calls me Marty." "Sarah, I can't tell you what they call me in mixed company, but it rhymes with witch." "Sarah, then." I turned and hugged Tommy. "I have to go now, sweetheart. I was just passing by and thought I'd get some ice cream, but I see you're busy. We'll do it another time." I forgot I had a 4-year-old in my arms and she started pulling my hair. "I want ice cream." "You'll have to talk to your mom for that." I tried to get her to sit back down, but she wasn't going to do it. "I want ice cream." "Looks like I'm stuck, Marty. Do you want to go get some ice cream? It's right down the street and they have the most delicious homemade you've ever tasted. It's peach season, and this is my favorite. My treat?" She grinned and stood up, kissing Brian lightly on the cheek. "I'll be back in about 45 minutes. Why don't you get everything ready for the grill?" We decided to take a walk, and the image of Brian with his mouth open made me smirk as we walked towards the store. Taylor didn't want to let me go, and I had forgotten how hard it was to carry a toddler in my arms. We told them they had to behave or they wouldn't get anything, and they complied. Taylor changed her mind 3 times before settling on blueberry. Tanya approached the choice with a seriousness that other 6-year-olds aren't ashamed of, and settled on banana. I took the peach one, and Marty, after the server gave her a taste, took the peach one as well. Tommy knew all the flavors and chose vanilla. The girls tasted what the others had and decided that the peach one was very tasty, and that's what they would take next time. They stayed surprisingly neat and clean, considering the circumstances, and walked back happy. Marty took Taylor, even though she was cranky, and Tanya clung to my arm. We arrived at the venue, and I told them I had to go. I got little gooey kisses and a big hug from my son, and left smiling. Marty would be good for Brian, and he always wanted more children. It looked like he was going to get a good deal. Next chapter. Marty called me out of the blue and offered me lunch. I hesitated for a moment, realizing she wanted to talk about Brian. Then, I made a decision. "Can you come to the hospital around noon? We'll have to use the cafeteria, but the food there is surprisingly good." "That will be fine. Can we do it at noon?" "I'll see you back here." Marty was much smaller than me, but she had the confident demeanor of someone successful in her field. We made our choices and sat down at the table, making small talk as we ate. Setting the tray aside, she grinned. "Brian and I are getting married. I wanted to be the one to tell you about it. I don't mean to gloat, your past is your past and has nothing to do with me, but you still play a big part in his life thanks to Tommy. I just thought it would be better if we met face to face. If you don't mind, and don't have to answer me, what went wrong in your marriage? I know Brian can be a bit of a narcissist sometimes when he's under a deadline or chasing something important, but he's still the nicest person I've ever met." Satisfied with years of therapy, I was able to be honest. Basically, in my mind, I became a little more important than Brian. I knew he was great at what he did, but I was the therapist. People lived or died because of my skills, and I became a little arrogant. Also, Brian had always been a homebody, and I loved going out and getting all the attention people gave me because of my looks or my skills. I started making lopsided decisions, assuming I was much better at family matters than he was. These ended up not being family decisions, but how Sarah wants it decisions. I made a lot of bad decisions. Dr. International was the straw that broke the camel's back. But even when he told me he would divorce me if I left again, I knew I could get him back before that happened. You know how it is. Would I have changed anything at that moment if I knew what I know now? Probably, but it wouldn't have lasted long. I ended up leaving knowing the consequences, doing it with 2 partners while I was away and then expecting everything to be fine when I got home. It was a shock and a revelation to me when it turned out that it wasn't. I know it pretty much shattered my self-image as someone who rises above the constraints of society. I ended up having to change jobs, losing my son and my husband, and none of what I did was worth the price I paid. She sat for a minute, absorbing what I told her, then sighed. I have a little experience with your situation. Not me personally, but I've had to work with many famous talking heads, and I've experienced firsthand their arrogance. So, as you can see, I understand exactly what a God complex is. More importantly, I know how to avoid people who have one, and how to behave with those I have to come in contact with. I'm glad you realized the error of your ways, and I'm sorry you got divorced, but I'm glad I got the man of my dreams as a result. Does that make sense? It did. I told my new man about this conversation the night we cooked dinner together. It was kind of our thing. If one of us made it before the other, the two of us would do it together, but we didn't really enjoy it. We used that time to relax, talk about how the day went, and let the stress of our professional lives go away. This left time for important things like cuddling while watching movies, cuddling while listening to music, and if we needed to snuggle with each other, just a hug. My relationship with my pediatrician ended when I found out that he loved children too much. It happened when my laptop crashed and I used his computer to send an important email about a proposed surgery. I saw a folder labeled Sarah and opened it thinking it would contain candid photos of me. There were a lot of pictures in there and I was very disgusted, so I searched some more and found another file. I asked two detectives, a man and a woman, to look at the file. They looked at it for about 30 seconds, then closed it and pulled the prosecutor away from his dinner. He listened to me and then gave me instructions. I was to take the laptop to his house while they got the warrant. Then I was to call and tell him what I found so the investigation could begin. I called on my way back. When I got back, he was already pacing the floor. When he saw his laptop in my hands, he instantly realized what I had seen and punched me in the nose with such force that it broke and I passed out. I heard the doorbell ring just as I collapsed to the floor. He ran out the back door with his laptop in hand, right at two policemen. Two huge police officers, both of whom were married and had children. They apparently thought he was resisting arrest and subdued him, resulting in several deep bruises and taser burns. When the trial was over, he got 15 years. They found a passage where he seduces one of his patients. Her parents sued him for everything he had, and he went to prison penniless. I had to go back to my therapist, and she helped me realize that I couldn't have known that. I had a good man, I thought, and I blew it. Maybe I'm destined to be alone to atone for my transgressions. 9 months later, I met Jeremiah. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a killer smile and the most gentle eyes I'd ever looked into. Gray was showing through on his temples and in his beard, but the muscles visible under his shirt didn't match the color of his hair. I was at a convention organized by my hospital for networking and recruiting. My past had taken a back seat. I was doing a great job at the new hospital, and they wanted to make me one of their faces in the community. There is a standard process where a graduate can apply based on a number of factors, but nothing was on paper at first and we were looking for fresh faces. At 35, I was the youngest surgeon in the state, and it was time for new blood. The symposium covered a wide range of topics related to medicine, and I found Jeremiah. I was a little surprised. He owned an insurance company specializing in medicine, was a financial controller, and a licensed practical nurse. He had 5 degrees in various disciplines, and his IQ was off the charts. His seminar on malpractice scared the hell out of all of us until he told us how to avoid lawsuits. He was witty, concise, and could make a quick joke when the topic got too dark, but his closing words had us all paying attention. Sometimes mistakes happen. When they happen, recognize them. If you try to get over it and do damage, but it turns out later that you were really at fault, it will be much worse in the public eye, and the jury will be very unsympathetic. Also, public opinion will stigmatize all doctors as inept slackers who are only in it for the money. There is now a vigorous debate about limiting malpractice payments, and some states are considering such a law based on a fairly sophisticated algorithm I helped develop. Until that law is passed, remember that the higher the level of fraud, the higher the payouts. I will be available for individual questions for the remainder of the conference. Thank you. There was a lot of positive feedback, and it seemed like 3 doctors had gathered around him. I gave up trying to talk to him and rushed to my next seminar. I didn't see him until late afternoon when I ran into a seemingly empty conference room, trying to dodge another doctor who had a magic drink that made all men think they were a gift for all women and should worship them accordingly. I had to either hide or slap him, which wasn't the best decision. I nearly jumped out of my skin when his voice came out of the darkness. Let me guess. Hiding from your demons? I recognized him and smiled. Only from one, I'm afraid. How about you? I needed a break. With the amount of time doctors spend in school, some of them might just not know how the real world works. You don't need to repeat yourself. As a doctor, I can say that I've made a lot of stupid decisions in my lifetime, but I'm proud to say that none of those decisions involved a patient. Well, then you're ahead of the curve. We spent the next 15 minutes in pleasant conversation. Then the door swung open and there he was. Dr. Dick. Ah, there you are. What are you doing? Well, I was going to have a little fun with this handsome man, but you barged in and ruined everything. Go away, I'm just about to get to the fun part. He swayed slightly as his alcohol-soaked brain tried to comprehend my words. He was about to leave when Jeremiah stood up, looming over him. Leave if you don't want to watch. He opened and closed his mouth several times and staggered out. We stared at each other for a moment before dissolving into laughter. When we stopped, we started talking, just chatting sweetly about safe topics. The next morning I saw him at breakfast and he stood up, inviting me to join him. I went to my seminars and he went to his, after which we agreed to have lunch. Dinner was nice. He took me to a restaurant away from the conference where we could relax, and then to a small club where the music wasn't too loud and we danced a few slow songs. I was a tall girl, but in his arms I felt petite. Back at the hotel, he escorted me to my room. It turned out we were from the same town and our relationship grew quickly. He was married, but she had tragically died in childbirth from a disease no one knew about. The baby was saved, although she spent almost 2 months in the hospital. She was 7 years old. I told him my story about 3 months after we started dating and right after we started having intimacy. He listened non-stop and then just held me while I cried, scared to death that he wanted to stop seeing me. My heart melted when he uttered, "You can't change the past. It seems like you've made a lot of mistakes, but you've learned from them. If I didn't think I could trust you, we wouldn't be where we are now." I tried to love him to death. Thankfully, it didn't help, but by the end of the weekend, he was pretty lethargic. We still took our time, but gradually I spent more and more time at his house. I was as nervous as I could be introducing him to my son, but they got along great. Jer was a very good archer, and he had introduced Tommy to the activity after talking to my ex. He didn't tell me anything about their meeting except that he seemed like a decent guy. I came home one day and saw a house full of kids. Tommy and his little sisters. All 3 of them. Brian and Marty had a child together, very bright and apparently scary smart. I raised an eyebrow and he blushed slightly, then grinned. We're running this herd for 2 days while Marty goes to New York for her award. Looks like her star is rising since she's been named executive producer of Brian's new show. CNN persuaded Brian to host an hour-long show 3 days a week, alternating with another program. Ratings were high and growing. Brian's only demand in the negotiations was that his wife host the show, and the network immediately agreed. Things worked out so well for Marty that the show won an Emmy, and Brian couldn't contain his pride in his wife. On one of his shows, he even spoke eloquently about how much he loved her, which didn't embarrass her one bit. I couldn't help it and watched his show, feeling a prick of regret as I realized that if things had been different, if I had managed to stay faithful and hurt my ego enough, he would have raved about me on his show. Then I looked at Jer and realized that maybe he was the place I was destined to go. 2 days turned into 3 when they asked for an extra day. Jer was over the moon. The big girls wanted to shoot Terry's bow, but he was a teenager and the bow was physically too big for them. Jer solved that problem by going to the academy and buying them little bows and all the accessories. Taylor was a born marksman, and Tanya was a very good one. Lucy, Jer's daughter, helped a lot. Then Tina wanted a bow, and I came to the rescue by getting her one of those toy bows with suction cups on the end of the arrows instead of a point. It was very good for a 3-year-old, but I regretted my decision every time I had to pull an arrow out of the TV screen, patio door, or car window. Jeremiah and the kids thought it was hilarious. I was both exhausted and excited. Lucy was a little wary at first, not wanting to share Daddy with anyone, But gradually she accepted me, and we became close. I gave her all the love I didn't have time to give my son, and she thrived. Having girls her age around her for a few days lifted her spirits, and when they left, we all hugged and kissed. We were sitting on the couch relaxing when Lucy crawled up to us. After spinning around us until she was comfortable, she said something that blew my world up. "Mommy, can I have a baby sister?" She called me Mommy for the first time, and my tears flowed as I hugged her. When I was able to speak, I kissed the top of her head. "That depends, baby. What does Daddy think of the idea?" Daddy grinned, holding out a small box. "Daddy thinks it's the best idea he's heard in a long time." I cried for 30 minutes, all the while kissing and hugging them both. Next chapter. I had wanted a baby for a long time, but Will won out, and 2 weeks before my 38th birthday, I gave birth to an 8-pound boy. The waiting room was filled to capacity. I was the doctor's favorite, and the nurses were constantly bustling around me. I wasn't surprised to see Brian, Marty, and their family. I was surprised to see his mother. She had been out of state for a long time, and I didn't know she was back. I didn't see the tears as she asked to hold her new granddaughter in her arms. Soon, she and Jeremiah's mother were sitting in each other's arms, contemplating the future of all the children gathered. Lucy made sure to be the first to pick her brother up in her arms, following her parents. She was a little disappointed that he turned out to be a boy, but accepted it as soon as she looked at his face. When he was 5 and she was 13, if he was cranky, she would take him in her arms and shower him with kisses. Soon he was giggling and trying to wipe them off as fast as she was putting him down. One of the biggest pictures on her night table was the one of her holding her brother in her arms for the first time. I was 53, a grand dame of surgery. Knowing that in a few years my arms wouldn't last, I planned my retirement. I was a mother to young doctors and nurses, and they often confided in me. One of the most beautiful nurses came to me for advice. "I heard you were working with Doctors International. I have been offered a job there. Is there anything you can recommend?" I didn't sugarcoat it and told her about my experience and what it had cost me. She had recently gotten married, and I asked if her husband was okay with it. "He doesn't know yet." "Then you should talk about it. Are you willing to be away from him for that long? Will he be willing to wait for you to come home? The organization has done a great job, but there's always a price and a downside. You should weigh your decision carefully before you make it." In the end, she didn't go, and one person went instead. She broke up with her boyfriend before she left, and when she returned, he was already engaged, which dashed all her hopes of reconciliation. We thought she did it on purpose, in case she decided to have an affair or two while she was away, and never once thought he would replace her so quickly. She behaved pretty meekly for about 4 months, and when she was offered another assignment, she turned it down. Tommy finished his master's degree in journalism and got a job as an assistant at Fox. Lucy was a junior in a pre-hospital care program. Tanya is in the same program, and they live next door. Taylor is a senior in high school and has a full scholarship to volleyball. Tina is a freshman and looks like she's going to major in boys. In her 14 years, she looks 20, and men and boys just adore her. She has a good head on her shoulders, and if they push hard, she shows them pictures of her, her sisters, brother, cousins Lucy and JJ with ribbons and trophies for archery and karate. Tommy was a reserve member of the Olympic team last year, and JJ, who is going into her 15th year, already has a second-degree black belt. Lucy was the state archery champion in her age group 2 years ago, narrowly beating her cousin Taylor. I met Brian at a coffee shop one day, and we sat down at a table. I apologized again for my behavior, but he brushed me off. "It's in the past. Let's leave it in the past." Instead, we complained about our kids and spouses for half an hour, kissed, and went our separate ways. I thought about it as I watched him walk away down the sidewalk. The old saying that cheaters never succeed came to mind, and I realized it was wrong, at least in my case. Yes, I did a terrible thing by falling into complacency and arrogance, and I suffered for a while. But in the end, I think the pain I went through helped me become a better person. I like to think it impacted my marriage and relationships with all the people I held dear. I used that experience when I counseled the young people I worked with, hoping that my story would change them for the better. I grinned, fumbling in my pocket for an envelope. My gift to my husband for their upcoming wedding anniversary was 2 weeks at one of Thailand's most exclusive resorts. Sun, sand, clothing optional. I no longer had as strong a body as I had in my 30s, but I exercised and was recognized as one of the top 3 MILFs in my hospital. Jeremiah still looked at me as a young beauty, and I wished it would never go away. So I endured the pain and tried to ignore the ravages of time and nature while he dealt with some of those ravages. The end. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel and stay tuned for the next videos.